and then we'll talk about the programs as we get into it. And so we're going to look at this and see how things work. Now, all right, first thing I want to talk about is a bank holiday. Bank holiday is where the bank's closed. You can neither deposit, and at this time, the bank holiday meant you actually couldn't withdraw. This is before ATMs, etc. You had to go to a teller. Recently, Greece had a financial crisis, and they actually declared a bank holiday that lasted a couple of weeks. And they actually restricted how much money people could draw out on a daily basis. It was $67, something like that. But FDR closes the banks. Remember, the banks are the first thing people ran to get their money if it was there. So he closes the banks. You can't take any money out. You can't put any money in. And the idea is he wants time to go to Congress and to get things flowing. So he went to some congressmen, and they drafted up an idea. And the act became known as the Glass-Steagall Banking Act. Banking Act of 1933. A lot of different things, okay? And we have Senator Glass and Senator Harry Steagall. Now, this did two things. First off, it set up the FDIC. If you've been to a bank and it says FDIC, that basically means your deposit, the money you're putting in, will be insured up to a certain amount. Prior to this, it wouldn't have been. And today, if you go in a bank and it doesn't say FDIC, run really fast the other direction. Okay. The other thing it set out to do is it told banks you have to pick. You can either be commercial banking and take deposits from individual people, or you can be involved in the stock market bank. So they separated the two, and there is a commission called the SEC designed to make sure they don't meddle and everything is going fine. We don't want the stock market to collapse like it did. And lucky for us, since this time it hasn't. It's getting really scary. I mean, a couple of weeks ago here, something happened with the computers, and they had to close it for the day, and that's crazy. People rely on this. There it is. Now, around this time as well, an organization is set up, and it's called the Dow Jones. Dow Jones is basically an industrial average, and so they tell us as a whole what stocks are doing well, what stocks are doing bad, so that you don't speculate, that you have some research. And this coupled with NASDAQ, which is another kind of average thing, we judge how our market is doing, okay? Now, we're going to move into economics, right? Now, economics, as U.S. history goes, is pretty difficult. Now, classical economics is what we are here. The market is perfect. It's self-sustaining. Government intervention can only be a detriment, can only hurt the economy, so therefore hands-off, laissez-faire, correct? Supply creates its own demand, meaning if you make something, people are going to want it. The economy is stimulated, more goods are produced. However, look up there, the market automatically adjusts to boom and bust, right? Now, FDR says this can't happen. There is another school of thought of economics named after John Maynard Keynes that is called Keynesian economics. He is saying that the market is not perfect. It's not self-sustaining. Equilibrium will include unemployment, negative growth. Consumer income stimulates demand, which causes economic growth. When economic growth is lacking, the government should stimulate demand. In other words, Keynesian economics is built on the theory of you must spend money to make money, even if that money is not there. So this is the opposite of classical economics, of laissez-faire, of trickle-down. Basically, he says that if people aren't buying stuff to cause economic growth, the government should do something. They should create programs where people make money and then spend that money. Now, the greatest historical background you have here is this came out of the Great Depression, okay? So Keynesian economics, just remember, spend money to make money. Now, the problem is the Depression had hit everybody. And so when you spend money that you don't have, it's called deficit spending. A deficit means you owe somebody something, okay? And so you're spending money you don't have. But again, remember, Keynesian economics is built on the theory of spending money to make money. Now, here, the oxymoron of the day. An oxymoron is a word or phrase that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so critics of deficit spending will say, why are you going to spend money you don't have? FDR would answer that by saying, I'm spending money now to make money in the future and to make sure that we will never have another Great Depression. That's how he probably would answer that if he were around now. FDR, as I said, is different than Harding and Coolidge and Hoover, who were conservative. He is a liberal, which to our time today and starting here means he is a Democrat. And so what does that mean? That means he is going to favor general welfare instead of big business. He is going to lower tariffs, meaning there will be more goods coming in, more competition being created so that people get the best bang for their buck, meaning they're going to have competition and people are going to have to compete instead of just going what it is. He also believes in, as we said, deficit spending money you don't have. And lastly, he believes in changing stuff. If he doesn't see it works or work, he's going to change things. Now, FDR, and this is kind of maybe a foreign affair here, FDR begins something he calls the good neighbor policy. And if you notice here, it's Uncle Sam, and it's kind of maybe a Mexican hat. Maybe that's kind of broadly generalizing things. But we share this North-South American continent with many countries that are Hispanic, meaning that they come from the descent of Spanish or Portuguese. And so it says, Americanos todos luchamos por la victoria. We are all Americans, let's fight for victory. And the idea was to not make any enemies on these two continents. Let's be friendly with Canada, Mexico, Peru, Venezuela, all the countries there. We also have the ones in Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua. And so the general mentality, as I said, is to have good neighbors. And so if you think about State Farm, right? Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. But if you take that out and say, like a good neighbor, America is there. In other words, South America, you're having a problem. Come rely on us, and we'll use a deficit spending program to make sure you get out of it, even if it might hurt us in the long run. Now, that is the end of the first New Deal. What I want you to look at here in this little section is describe why FDR focused on the banks first in the Depression. Why did he pick that as his stating point? And then lastly, describe how the good neighbor policy would help the United States. If we had that thing of like a good neighbor, America is there, what's in it for us? Because remember, we're going to be a little selfish and worry about us. Now, the next thing we'll go through, and some of them will be here, and this time other ones in the second New Deal, will be the New Deal programs. And I gave you a lot more stuff written out, and I am going to explain some things. I know it's written down for you, but I'm going to have you underline some things so you understand what these programs were out to do.